about the water cycle, which I think was fairly pretty much review. And then we talked about the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is the one that's probably the least familiar. It's really kind of all about bacteria, right? And so the bacteria called nitrogen-fixing bacteria that get nitrogen into living things, and then denitrifying bacteria that get it out. That diatomic nitrogen molecule that's triple bonded, very tough. No other living things can do that and pry it apart and make it a part of. What are the molecules it's part of? And? DNA and RNA, exactly, good. So then we kind of brought those cycles together in this concept of primary productivity, and that primary productivity is a number that tops out somewhere because the producers run out of something, right? And whatever that missing ingredient is that you could add that would make them grow faster is the limiting nutrient. And it turns out that for most producers, that limiting nutrient is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that's why the kind of carpet bombing fertilizing we do of industrial fields tends to fuel algal blooms. Any questions over all of that from Monday?
So the bacteria, is it in the plant, or does it it exist outside the plant and the plant's just breathe it in?
Which bacteria? The nitrogen fixing ones? Both. So they live freely in the soil. And so a lot of plants just get that spare nitrogen from that. But then special plants called legumes, bean and pea plants, they actually have their own. They kind of come with bacteria. Yeah. Yep. Other questions? All right. That's not real. Not doing that. Ooh, carbon cycle. Make sure you got a lot of space here. Oh, that might have fixed it. Did that fix it, Nicholas? Nope. All right, so this is not just the carbon cycle. This is the carbon and oxygen cycle, and you know about that already because of those equations for photosynthesis and cell respiration, right? So, okay, again, we start in the atmosphere, and the form of carbon we find in the atmosphere, you knew already, is carbon dioxide. We also find O2 in that atmosphere. And so those two equations you already know by heart, hopefully, feed into that above ground portion of the cycle. CO2 uptake by plants, they're the only ones that can do it. Well, them and bacteria and protists. Then, because of food webs, all that carbon gets sent along those food webs to the other trophic levels. And everyone, including plants, is doing cell respiration, which of course takes oxygen and glucose in, gives off CO2 and water. And that's a nice little cycle right there. But kind of like the water cycle, the carbon cycle has both an above ground and a below ground portion. Because everything that's alive and full of carbon and other stuff, obviously, but everything that's alive eventually dies. Happy Wednesday. And while a lot of that carbon does get recycled into ecosystems, right, so that it's available for others, and some of it gets put back into the atmosphere from decomposers, some of it doesn't. Some of it ends up getting buried. Some of it gets deposited under the soil by those decomposers. Some of it stays in the soil and does become available. You know, organic molecules stay in the soil. It's part of this when we say a soil is rich and fertile. Sometimes that means carbon-containing molecules, but some of it doesn't. Some of it goes deeper. And those deep carbon deposits over long periods of geologic time, like we're talking like thousands, millions, billions of years, can change. Those carbon deposits can change form, and they can make things that are different from how they started. Like, what are some of the things that happen that we get from those deep carbon deposits, you know?
Fuels,
Fuels like
coal, gasoline.
oil, which we refine into gas, and yeah, natural gas, absolutely. We call them those three fossil fuels, right? You see why? Because they came from dead stuff. Yeah. Yep. And also they can change form into weird things like diamonds or graphite, okay? But yeah, those fossil fuels are kind of important to this cycle right now. Really burning anything puts carbon back into the air in the form of carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. So wood also. But from the depths of the earth, we're talking fossil fuels. Volcanoes are a way that chunks of carbon get put back into the atmosphere. And decomposers, you know, just the natural decomposition of organic stuff can also put carbon back in the atmosphere. So all three of those are ways that that cycle gets completed. And this is where a very obvious change to the carbon cycle has happened because of direct human activity. Because as humans, what we've done in the last 100, 150 years or so is we have basically built our society around burning those fossil fuels. Those fossil fuels basically power most of the technology that we have. And you know, we're in the process of trying to shift that because, of course, the fossil fuels are running out. But the effect it's had on the carbon cycle has been pretty profound. Basically, and you should write this down, what's happened is most of the Earth's carbon, by far, used to be underground. And as we've gotten more and more efficient at pulling fossil fuels out of the ground and burning them to power our technology, we have caused a major shift in that carbon cycle. And now, a lot more, a much bigger fraction of that carbon is loaded up in the atmosphere. Now, does that affect the oxygen carbon cycle? Is it going to end up suffocating us because too much carbon dioxide? Not even close. It's fine as far as us breathing and being able to do what we need to do. But it turns out that carbon dioxide does have an interesting side effect. And this feeds into another of those initial scenarios that we went through at the beginning, which was that the temperature, the overall temperature of the climate of our planet is increasing. We'll come back to that in chapter 6 when we go through all the human-caused environmental issues. For now, just know that that shift is there, that we have changed the carbon cycle. Questions? That's a big one, huh? A lot of details there. Make sure you know that. I don't know that I'd make you like draw it from scratch, but I could certainly put it on a test or a quiz and make you fill in the blanks. Yeah. Okay, I think just one more concept today, and that is the concept of niche or niche, depending how you want to say it. You know what the word means? It is kind of an everyday English word. It's not used a whole lot. Yeah, it's kind of specific. The way you'd use it in everyday language, like your parents would probably use it like, oh, you know, he used to like just not feel like he fit in at school at all. And man, then he joined the marching band. And as soon as he joined marching band, boy, he had all these friends and he was having a great time at school and he wanted to come. He really found his niche at school. That's how we use it in everyday language. It basically means the place you fit in, right? That's kind of what it means in ecology too. The niche is exactly how an organism fits into its ecosystem. This goes closely with modeling because you sort of have to know the same things. you know, we got to know for your niche. We got to know what your food is. What do you eat? Carnivore, herbivore, decomposer. How do you get your food? You know, if you're a predator, are you like sit and wait predator that builds a trap like a spider? Or a hippo that hangs out in the water? Or a cheetah that chases its prey down in a very exciting way? You ever seen a cheetah actually win, catch its food? It doesn't look like I thought it looked. I thought it was like a lion where they jump on its back and rawr, and now a cheetah like just runs until the antelope gets tired and then basically trips it from behind, and it goes down in a heap and then he jumps on it. You know, when is it doing what it does? Is it during the daytime or the nighttime? Nighttime, we call it nocturnal, right? Do you know what daytime active critters are called? It's not dayturnal, actually diurnal. And then there's my favorite word for the like deer that are active at dawn and dusk. They're active like in the in between times. They're called crepuscular. Isn't that a great word? Where does it live? How does it protect itself? You know, does it live up in a tree or down in a hole, or is it just walking around on the open ground? Is it in a microhabitat? Like, is it tiny and lives among grass plants? All of that, all this stuff. How it reproduces, temperatures it needs, all that stuff goes into niche. And the reason we mention it here is that there's this rule called the competitive exclusion principle. The competitive exclusion principle basically says yeah, niches can overlap. They can overlap. There's often times when two different species, you know, they're out at the same time of day. Maybe they have similar food sources. They can overlap. Their niches can start to kind of be somewhat the same. But what the competitive exclusion principle says is they're never the same. They're never completely the same. They never completely overlap. Why is that? If they can overlap some, why can't they totally overlap? Why does that never happen? No, they wouldn't be the same.
One would like out eat the other.
Yeah, basically what happens is as soon as you overlap enough with another species, the competition gets pretty intense, right? Because that's what that is. When two species need the same stuff, occupy the same, they're competing directly. And so they can start to overlap some, but if they get far enough overlapping, somebody starts to win. One of the two starts to outcompete the other, and they start to move apart again. Or one goes extinct, like you said, right? So basically, competitive exclusion says no two species can occupy the same niche, and species can get competed out of their niche. It's not usually what happens. Usually what happens is the losing species changes their niche. They start to evolve to where they're active at a different time of day or getting slightly different kinds of food or things like that. All right, I lied. One more thing. And another kind of disconnected concept, but I think you already mostly know the deal here. And this one goes with an initial scenario as well. If you remember the mosquito scenario, right? That we hate mosquitoes, we spray for them, but they turn out to be parasites of and food for a lot of different organisms. The concept to know here is the concept of keystone species. And to understand why we call them keystone species, you have to know that keystone isn't really a biology term. It's an architectural term. It's a term that comes from one of the most important and earliest architectural developments. In fact, architecture is named after this development. It's the arch. And the way you build an arch is really kind of cool. Like you don't need like a regular brick and mortar structure. You got to have the mortar, right? You got to glue stuff together. Not an arch. With an arch, all you do is you cut your stones in a specific way, which is basically you cut them kind of like that, right? And okay, you build a scaffold. You build like a wooden scaffold underneath the thing at first, and then you start stacking your blocks, right? But once you've stacked all these blocks, and as long as you've got what we call the abutments, which are putting force this way, you can drop letter D here, which is the keystone in, and then you can just take out the scaffold and the whole thing stands on its own. No mortar required, right? It's a cool thing. But of course, the reason we use that expression in an ecosystem is that a species like a mosquito that so many different things depend on is like the keystone in that if we take it out, right? You get it? Everything falls. Yeah. So that's the idea. It's one species that so many other species are dependent on that if you pull it out, the whole ecosystem can collapse. 3 examples. One is loggerhead turtles. And unfortunately, what usually happens is we don't discover what the keystone species are until they get threatened, right? And then we realize, oh, yeah, a whole bunch of stuff ate that. And with turtles, with sea turtles, it turns out that they're very vulnerable in their infancy, right? When they're born and they hatch from their eggs, the weak link is that the parents, the mothers lay their eggs pretty far inland on the sand, and the babies have to make it all the way out to the water. And artificial light really messes them up. So where you have a lot of, we like to build hotels and stuff on seashores, screws them up. Turns out there's all kinds of things that eat those babies. And if the babies aren't there, those ecosystems start collapsing. Mosquitoes in wetlands, we mentioned already. And then salmon are another good example. So many different things eat salmon in their different life stages. The eggs, the little guppies, minnows, whatever they are, fry. And even the adults, right? Bears and stuff eat salmon. All right. I think that'll do. Oh, and if you don't know about mosquitoes, I'm going to show you a picture. I also have little action figures of them. But the different life stages of a mosquito. Have you ever seen mosquito larvae in like a stagnant pond? They're so gross. They look like, that's a good picture of a wetland. But yeah, these things. Ugh. You got this little tube, like a jet of water, and then you kind of squirt around the stagnant water. You can see them moving like in jerks like that. Yeah, everything eats those, turns out. It's a good reason, by the way, not to have like stagnant water around your house because that's where mosquitoes breed. So if you notice a lot of mosquitoes, get rid of the puddles. Yeah, okay, good. What I have for you to do is a comparison of the 3 different cycles we've looked at. It's basically a table where you're going to be filling in the organisms involved in each cycle, living things, the geological chemical processes, and the biological processes happening in each of the 3 cycles. And then kind of comparing. You have something to do today, to do tomorrow. And this will be Friday.